I think that a starting point where that helps me think about a question like this is when it comes to the arts and what makes a piece of art good. Again, that truth, goodness, beauty component, where those are the three transcendentals, difficult to separate from one another. I do think there can be elements of truth or goodness or beauty in a piece of artwork. So there might be well, let's take this back to the beginning because we've already gone there a little bit. When God made everything that is, he made it and he called it good. So truthfully speaking, there's an element of goodness in all things, right? Literally, all things, right? The things that have been made. So, I think when it comes to art, again, a starting point for me is I think that good art helps us remember. It helps us, and the word I think Plotinus used this word when we encounter some things. There's a recognition, so we recognize true things, not cognize them, but recognize them. So good art helps us remember things, sometimes that we didn't know we already knew were true. It helps us remember who and what we are. It reminds us of the story that Mike shared, the gospel story. I think that art that is not good on the whole is typically art that is for the purpose of making us forget those things. And there's plenty of that out there as well. So that maybe that's the starting point in this conversation. The two examples I think of, my friend Heidi taught me about this. She's a teacher of the classics. And I loved the comparison. She talked about the difference between, you guys will have to help me remember, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, is it Helen of Troy that they were fighting over? I think that was the woman, right? No, yep. Oh, Matthew's like, I don't know. I think it was Helen.
I don't know.
So, she was taken. And so the king goes to try and get his wife back or whatever. Anyway, a whole thing. And that started the war. And then that's the Iliad. In the Odyssey, you have Odysseus trying to get home from war. And it's a 10-year journey. So you have these two female characters, Helen, but also Odysseus's wife, Penelope, in the Odyssey now. So the Iliad was the background. Now we're in the Odyssey. Two comparisons. One is Helen prepares a feast, which is a work of art, for the soldiers who come to visit. Odysseus' son comes there to visit. He's looking for his father. And he and his soldiers are there, and she prepares the feast, and she puts a drought in the drinks to make them forget what has happened, because she doesn't want to be reminded. It's too painful. Penelope, on the other hand, is waiting for her husband to come home. And as she's waiting, the suitors are closing in because they want to marry her and take over Odysseus's kingdom. And so to hold them off, she says, I must make a burial shroud for my father-in-law, Laertes. Helen is a master weaver. And so she goes up into her tower every day and she masterfully weaves this burial shroud for her father-in-law. But every night she goes up and she undoes the whole thing. All of her work is undone. She starts over again every day. So one of the points of that story that Heidi was teaching me is that art doesn't exist for its own sake. There is a telos, or a purpose to it, Mike. So that's to your earlier point. But the other part is that Penelope's art was her act of remembrance that her king was returning, that he would one day return to her. And so there's something about good art that helps us remember that our king is returning, that the story is true, and it recalls us back to those truths. So there's a launching off point.
Yeah, I love that the first part of the question, what makes goodness good? And this is an idea that I'm wrestling with. So let me hedge my statement with that this may be messy, and I may in the next Ask the Apologist go, hey, remember what I said last time? I was wrong. Or there was something more precise to say. But I think what makes goodness exemplified in things like art, music, and literature good is that I think what the arts do, well, when it comes to the concept of beauty, it's that these things are aiming at a notion of perfection. It's like another way to think about beauty, that like, what is beauty? When you perceive that something is beautiful, what is it that you're perceiving? And I think what you're perceiving is a sense of perfection. And it's drawing us. That's why Lewis says, like, when we see something beautiful, it's drawing us past the beautiful thing to the source of the beautiful thing. Because the things that we see, it's like It's not so much that we want to say it's like literally perfect, but we're like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. That story, it's perfect. That song, it's perfect. When you behold the beauty of my wife, it's like, that's perfect. The embrace, that's perfect. Well, why do we have a sense of perfection? Why do we have this concept of perfection? And where do these beautiful things point to? What do these good things point to? So I think when it comes to what makes the art good, in a sense, if I'm understanding the question right, is it's because it's a list, it's drawing out of us a sense of awe based on this notion of perfection. But then the question comes from what is the source of ultimate perfection? And is that then God? And it's interesting. This seems to me like one of the things Jordan Peterson's wrestling with and some of his contemporaries, because they look at the arts and they think, well, I don't think, they firmly believe that there's a hierarchy in the arts and some unity that they're all striving towards, all pointing towards. Well, that's very much a Christian conception of beauty. Yeah, the beauty of things draws us past them, this sense of perfection that we perceive in them. We're drawn past it to go from where is this thing's source? And of course, Christians would say it's in the nature of God, who is perfectly perfect. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. This is that's one of these ideas I'm wrestling with too.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right on track there, Mike, because Lewis also talks about transposition. He has this excellent essay called Transposition, where he talks about this concept of is exactly what this question is. What makes those good things good? And he says it's God's goodness being transposed into these lesser things. And so we get a glimpse of God, almost like, you could have Beethoven's fifths transposed into, just a piano solo, right? You would still see glimpses of the beauty and the amazingness of that, but it would be pointing towards the bigger, greater,
the source, which is even better. That's a great analogy.
Which is even better. So yeah, I love that. If you've never read C.S. Lewis's essay Transposition, go read it, because I just think
I have not. I'm going to Google that right now.
All right, go check it out. It's really, really good.